At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. And you can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com, the home of the online infidelity investigation. You think your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend's cheating on you, you give us their email address and we trace it back to online dating websites and personal ads, and we catch them cheating online. Now, this show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea. It's still about 35 days, maybe 40 days I've been drinking this tea, and I tell you, it really has changed my life. I've been doing the Daniel fast now for 28 days on Monday. Today is Tuesday. 29 days Daniel fast. I've been drinking this tea for about 40 days. I'm losing weight. I'm feeling great. I was just telling our guest I was swimming this morning. I was at this swimming. I swam a mile the other day. I swam about a half mile today. And I'm going to, after the show's up, I'm going to go on a bike ride, on a bicycle ride. And I got a date with a 25-year-old tomorrow. Okay. I'm 55 years old. I'm still out there, causing trouble. GetTheTea.com. You can't beat this stuff. It'll cure what ails you. And you go to the website, GetTheTea.com too. There's Life Change Tea. There's all kinds of supplements on there and herbal remedies and drinks and things. You got to check it out. Just at least make an effort to go to the website and check out GetTheTea.com and see what they got there for you. Okay. I think third time's a charm, I think they say is the expression. We got Gary Meece back, I think for the third time at least. And he's just did a, what would you call it, a condensed version of his past two books, The Case Against the West Memphis Three Killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. We got Gary back, and the book just hit the presses. The ink's not even dry yet. It just hit the presses on April 15th. We got him here on April 17th. Gary Meece, are you there, my friend?
Yes, Ed, I'm here.
Now, is this the third time you're back or the fourth time?
The fourth time.
Really? God bless you. Fourth time. It takes a lot to get back here four times. Okay. People usually...
We talked about Jesse Miskelly's arrest back in November, and then I had two episodes earlier about the case in general. So
I almost forgot about that arrest.
Everybody's hoping they'll forget about those arrests, but,
yeah.
You know.
That's right. The kid he's not a kid anymore, but this grown man was driving around with no headlights and no driver's license in the middle of the night.
Yeah. For three times and over a 4-month period, he was caught driving without a license. It's, and it's not murder, but it's against the law.
And it's irresponsible too. Come on, give me a break, man.
So, yeah, it's irresponsible as can be.
Yeah. So remind the audience though, who is Gary Meece? Tell us about yourself.
Ed, I'm a longtime journalist. I worked at the Memphis Commercial Appeal for almost 28 years. I retired from there. I worked for about 4 years at the West Memphis Evening Times. I was a managing editor there. And that's really when my interest took hold on this West Memphis 3 case. I was very much aware of it before that. And I mean, I was in the Commercial Appeal newsroom, literally 10 feet away from where a lot of planning of coverage was going on. I wasn't directly involved in it, but I was, listening to it all day long for, a couple of years, actually, because it went on for quite a while. So, I was very familiar with the case, but I got inspired when I was over in West Memphis to take it on because I wasn't seeing anybody explaining the facts of the case as they actually exist. I will say William Ramsey's book Abomination came out about this sometime after I started working on my books, and it's really a good overview of the case, and covered a lot of the same things that I covered, and plus added stuff. I've got stuff he doesn't have. And, and I, at one point I even considered dropping, I know we're talking a little too long about this, but at one point he'd run into some copyright problems apparently, and they pulled his book briefly from Amazon. I thought, well, he's having problems. I'll get into this. And by the time he popped back up, I really committed myself to finishing the book, but it took me several more years. Then I had this 2-volume set. The price point was not what I wanted it to be, so I condensed it down I started out at 220 words, knocked it down to 180 into 2 volumes, and then about 80,000 words in this condensed version. It covers the big stuff. I don't get into some of the details, obviously, that I got into with the other two the bigger books, but covered the essentials as far as I'm concerned. It's really probably a better read, and it's cheaper than buying those 2 books by quite a bit. So it's also available on Kindle.
And it just came out, hot off the presses.
Yeah, well, I knew I was going to be on here, and I've been planning on putting it out within a week or 2 of this. So I just pushed myself this weekend to get it finished. So there you go.
Yeah, it's amazing what a deadline will do for you, right?
Look, I worked at newspapers for 40 years, so yeah, it's amazing. Ed, the 25th anniversary of the murders of Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, 25th anniversary is coming up May 5th. And, I didn't really want to peg my book the 25th anniversary, but I knew there was going to be interest in it at that point. And we're going to be discussing today podcast called the Truth and Justice Podcast with Bob Ruff. I know Bob was a guest on your show, and you didn't really agree on a lot of things about the case, but there's a lot. I think there is some continued. Surprisingly, there's still so much interest in this case that it amazes me. But it is highly interesting and highly complex.
Let me start, before we get into the whole Truth and Justice podcast and Bob Ruff and stuff like that. In your book, The Case Against the West Memphis 3 Killers, is there anything new in there you've added since the last 2 books?
Not very much. A few updates on what I think the last book there's not that much, and I'm not counting it as some sort of major any new revelations. If you bought the earlier 2 books and you read through them, you're not going to learn enough from that book to make it worth your while to buy that one. You just want to read a condensed version, great, buy it. But I'm not trying to sell it on the basis of there's a lot of new information in there. Gotcha. I do have some updates on Miss Kelly's arrest and Jason Baldwin getting a new job, and apparently a job that's mostly involved with fundraising, but with the cover that it's to get innocent people who are convicted unjustly out of prison, but it's not really clear how much actual work is going into that. And it seems like it's mostly a fundraising effort. And then Eccles, of course, is putting himself out constantly as, he was an artist. He decided he's not going to do art anymore. And he's got this book coming out on high magic. I mean, I sort of hate touting his book, but he does have a book coming out that's going to, present his views on his magical practices. So,
he's come out of the closet totally now. A follower of Crowley, and a practitioner of black magic. There's no, people used to laugh at me 2 short years ago about that, but here it is,
Well, I think he probably would, to be fair about this, I think he would probably argue about whether it's black magic or not, but he invokes these so-called angels with these awesome powers. And I'm agnostic about whether he actually calls up angels or not. I'm not saying it actually happens, but he seems to either believe it or it's part of his spiel. And he and Lori, apparently have a big ceremony they do every day involving this sort of practice. And it dates back at least to John Dee in the Elizabethan age and the calling up of the holy guardian angels, and really before that. It's a longstanding magical practice with very looked on very much with askance by the religious powers, because they saw it as a gateway to darker forces. I can't disagree with that. It seems like it's problematic in a lot of ways, but that's a matter of belief. But
it's interesting too, though. You say that Lori now is also engaging in this openly. When she used to poo-poo and deny all this kind of activity too over the years. It was just foolishness.
Yeah, and they both have Patreon. At least he was touting her. I never know what's going on there because they change stuff up all the time. But he was touting her as some sort of occult consultant and to help with your personal problems on Patreon. Now, I can't imagine why somebody would want to go seek the advice of Laura Davis about building better relationships and so forth when she's married to Damien Eccles. But I guess there's a market there somewhere.
There is, because I'm in the public eye, and I get a lot of phone calls and emails and stuff from people that I could easily take advantage of, and I could manipulate, and take their money and tell them, oh yeah, I'll investigate your thing for you, and go and the people are out there, the people are out there just waiting to be taken advantage of. And if you create a funnel, if your whole marketing is to create a funnel of luring in gullible people and people who like information fed to them, and don't really look at both sides of the facts and just want to come in, you're breeding a bunch of suckers to be coming and taken advantage of. But this whole business about calling angels and stuff like that goes way back to Exhibit 500, doesn't it? Wasn't he back then?
Yes. And he was calling himself a demonologist at one point. And then he at one point back then, he also had, which isn't technically, see, this is where you get into the weeds on this. It's technically, demonologist sounds like a very dark and black magic sort of practice, but there's a way that you can fudge around that by saying, well, I'm doing it for demons so I can control them and, make them do my will for good purposes. It's ridiculous, but that's the rationale. And so you can do this, you can find a justifiable excuse for this and palm it off as something else. He also was visited by various entities. He said he had a dead woman that lived inside him. He had a witch that he claimed he had a witch that followed him from Oregon back to West Memphis and was waging psychic battles with him. There's the delusions he had at that time, unless he was just simply making things up, and he had a pretty good imagination. If that's the case, then it's incredible that he was out walking around quite a bit of the time. Though he did spend, anybody who follows the case for a while knows that he made 3 trips to mental hospitals within the year before the killings. So, and all those were connected with violent acting out. Speaking of which, Eccles went to Oregon with his family the summer before 1992, and I know we're not quite, as Ruff would say, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I don't mind doing this. he got involved in a thing there with his family, and he ended up going to the mental hospital, and he was there for maybe 2 days. Then he went home on a bus. And the reason his family didn't want him back was they considered him to be dangerous. There were smaller children in the home, and they were concerned that he was a danger to them. He threatened to slash his mother's throat. Ruff made it sound as if Jerry Driver
made that up, right?
Was a probation officer back in Crittenden County, West Memphis, was somehow responsible for Eccles' his trip to the mental hospital in Oregon, and had made up this story that people believed about Eccles threatening to eat his father with a spoon, no less, but eat his father and eat his face and so forth. And Eccles himself admits at some point that he said this. The hospital officials put it down repeatedly in the notes. And Ruff buys this later denial from Eccles about this happening and its characterization, and mischaracterizes the whole thing. He cherry picks quotes from Joe Hutchison, who was Damien Eccles' father, that, it was only a spoon and it wasn't really a problem, and Damien was a nice boy and all that. Well, if you read what Joe Hutchison actually said to various hospital officials and police and so forth, he's all over the place. At one point, he said that Eccles, you could tell he was irritated that Eccles was spending his money, that he was working at a gas station out there. He was spending his money on things like buying new knives, and had a holster with knives in it, but had 3 knives in his holster. This is what his father says is this incident was about initial, at least one of the times he described it. And he went in there and talked Eccles out into giving him the knives. And then, in other stories, the knives disappear, and he was just using a spoon to stir his hot chocolate. And in other cases, he was threatening. I mean, that same evening, supposedly he was threatening to drink bleach and kill himself. And he said at some point that he was drunk. So it's just, the whole thing's just a mess. But Ruff pays no attention to all the nuances and contradictions and outright lies that go on with that, and opts for the easiest, simplest narrative that fits the narrative he wants it to fit. And this is not an isolated incident. It is part of the way he's doing his podcast. And, he...
Well, you say that he buys into it, but I wonder how much it is that he's been bought, because if you look at his Patreon, I just heard this on a William Ramsey interview just the other night, that Eccles is one of his Patreon supporters. Now, who else is Eccles supporting that's broadcasting about this case? Even the WM3.org, the big fundraisers that were funneling money over to Eccles, he never gave them any money. So the only one Eccles that we know of is given any money to in advancement of this story that he's tried to come up with is Bob Ruff and the Truth and Justice podcast. Otherwise, the money's always flowed to Eccles instead of away from Eccles, except for this one instance.
And we have no idea how much money is flowing either. Right.
And we do also know that there was an offer
of his advertising. Yeah. I think Bob Ruff likes making money off the podcast. I don't blame him.
Yeah,
but it's a fact. I'd like to make money off a podcast too, I suppose. I wanted to put that much time and effort into it.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. But also, too, there was an offer of a foot massage as well, wasn't there?
There was that. The whole thing is, see, this part of what it's somewhat frustrating about this is he throws out these little tidbits. For instance, there was a thing about he cast doubt on whether Eccles had a pentagram tattoo on his chest at the time of the murders. It was described in a police report, and there's no reason to think that he didn't have a pentagram tattoo, except there is a picture of Eccles standing in his backyard, more than one actually, with his chest exposed, and it doesn't. I agree with Ruff. It doesn't look like there's a pentagram on his chest. However, was described as a faded, homemade tattoo. So it wasn't something that was necessarily going to show up in a poor quality photograph, which almost all the photographs associated with the case are not really good, high quality. And but he has this conversation with Damien Eccles over I think it was over the phone and not in person, but about his tattoo. And Eccles apparently did this little game where he takes off his shirt and looks around for a few minutes trying to find where the tattoo would be. And gosh, I just can't find it 25 years later. Of course, his whole body's covered with tattoos now. And I don't know how you would find it's probably been covered up by, 3 or 4 magical charms at this point. But anyway, he just takes it at face value. And then it turns out, well, he probably did have the tattoo, but he just let himself, the narrative be controlled by Eccles completely. However, he has talked apparently to Eccles, and he's talked apparently to Jason Baldwin. But we haven't heard anything to speak of about Jason Baldwin at this point. We've heard very little about Miskelly. We've actually heard quite a bit about Damien Eccles, but very selective narrative there too. And he has this sort of overarching theme where he says he's done all this research on the case, but he's just learning as he goes along. Mm. Those things don't compute. Either you know something about it or you don't. If you're going to go in as totally ignorant of the case, fine. And be totally ignorant of it, and you're going to spend a long time just figuring out what's going on. And he gives the air of that at times. He falls back on that anytime he gets some criticism. Well, I'm just learning about the case along with you, or we're not there yet with the facts of the case.
Well, in the opening description of the podcast, he describes it as a cold case, an unsolved case, and 3 men trying to get their life back together after being wrongly accused. But listen, we have a commercial break we have to take here. Today with Gary Meece. The case against the West Memphis 3 killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. Great new book, just came out on Amazon. It'll be in the Opperman Report bookstore. And we're talking about the West Memphis 3 case again, too, but also, too, with the new Truth and Justice podcast, and Bob Ruff, a previous guest of mine. And we're just kind of trying to get the facts out to you, the reality of the case going on here. We'll be right back after these. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subhash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find a link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you can get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. And we're here today with Gary Meece, author of the book, The Case Against the West Memphis 3 Killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. And now, Gary, just to clean up a couple of things we were talking about in the last segment, you mentioned about the Eccles being committed to the mental institution, the psychiatric ward, they call it nowadays. But he was released just between 30 and 60 days before these murders. Am I right?
And the last time he was in a mental hospital was in September after his return from Arkansas, or return to Arkansas. He violated his probation because he just showed up and he wasn't supposed to be coming back to Arkansas. So he wasn't doing he wasn't doing due diligence with the probation people, Gary Driver specifically, but he was put in a youth facility in Jonesboro, I believe, and while he was there, he was found to be licking the blood off another boy, and this was such a weird thing that they put him back in the charter hospital in Little Rock, where he had been there in June for a pretty close to a month. After threatening, he'd gotten arrested for terroristic threatening and breaking and entering and so on and so forth in a runaway situation with his girlfriend Deanna Holcomb, and had been shipped off to and they threatened suicide. They shipped him off to charter. He stayed there for about a month, and this is where all this Exhibit 500 material comes from. It's mostly from these there were 3 trips to mental hospitals, twice to charter, and once to St. Vincent's and Portland, which was brief 2 days. And I can't remember, he stayed up, I think, a week or two in the charter in September. But they took a lot of notes on him. It's very consistent for the most part. And the diagnoses are sort of all over the place, but they do describe very troubling, weird behavior, satanic involvement, preoccupation with cult matters. He's intimidating. He's compliant quite a bit of the time. He's also intimidating the other residents there. And then there's also, he had gotten Social Security after he got out of there, and he turned 18 in that December. He applied very shortly after that for Social Security disability based on the fact that he was not mentally competent to support himself, and listed, among other things, that he was a sociopath, and actually had a long list of things that he had said he'd been diagnosed with, and it was all fairly true that he'd been diagnosed as, this mental illness and that mental illness and this substance abuse and that substance abuse and so on and so forth. And so he was continuing to get counseling, and he showed up and he actually went to, he was seen by a psychiatrist the day that he killed these boys. And in the notes for that day, this Dr. Irby stated that he had this proclivity for impulsive, violent acts that very day.
I never heard that before.
Just hours before. Yeah. In fact, that's why his mother had this big thing about getting his prescription refilled at the Marion Pharmacy. And it was a lot of back and, not that it's that important to the case, honestly, except to her credibility, but it's back and forth about whether he got his imipramine that afternoon, the next day. And she was not really consistent with that. She had a very hard time putting together a cohesive narrative. But if you listen to Bob Ruff now, the whole family was just all on board. There's just iron out a few little discrepancies here and there. And, he had an absolute ironclad alibi for the evening of May 5th. He was talking to these girls on the phone, even though this is what Ruff is saying, that he had 9 alibi witnesses. Well, 3 of those witnesses were girls who said they didn't talk to him that evening from 4:30 till 9:30, maybe later, 9:20, maybe later, which is when the boys were probably killed, when they ventured into the woods in West Memphis.
Wait, to back up for a bit, was he approved for the SSDI?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, one of his buddies said that Eccles had this pact. And I don't know that I do know how to get in contact with Deanna Holcomb, and I've tried to preserve her I have preserved her privacy, but I do know where she is, what her name is, how to get a hold of her. And I've contacted her in 2 different, a letter and through Facebook, both. And both cases, she's not responded, but I've tried to get her to clarify about, there was a story that Eccles was going to sacrifice their baby if she ever became pregnant and had a baby as part of a ritual sacrifice. And it's not clear exactly. She said this, and she said that's the reason she broke up with him, because she thought that he was going to make her sacrifice the baby because he's too big a coward to do it himself. So literally what she said.
Wow.
And so that's pretty heavy stuff. And this is a woman she was really, I think, 15 or 16. So she's a child, really. She's a teenager. But, a child or teenager who knew about as well as anybody. They both practiced, according to her, black magic. And she was repentant about that at the time she gave her interviews and so forth. But she said she did.
Yeah, her new boyfriend, too, gave a statement to the police, and he went to great detail about the rituals and the ceremonies and stuff that they did, that she and Eccles had done together.
Yes, Shane Divelbliss.
Right.
Shane Divelbliss was attacked by Eccles in the hallway at Marion High School by Eccles, and Eccles had grown his nails out to 1.5 inches and filed them to sharp points, and he was trying to claw Shane's eyes out. Fortunately for Shane, they pulled Eccles off of him, and Eccles got into some trouble for that. I don't think he was charged legally for it. Probably should have been, but it was in a school. You know how that goes. And anyway, Shane Dibblibliss, when he does this interview with, I think it's Brian Ridge, but the West Memphis Police, he describes Eccles as being a very controlling person who's very persuasive and intimidating with his friends, if you want to call it that. And then Dibblibliss explains all these like he said that Eccles had sent these black magic type things to Deanna when they broke up that he looked at as curses, and he actually seemed very. He says, "I don't know that much about this." But then he does all this explanation into these fairly esoteric occult things, and then a few years later, as an aside, Shane Dibblibliss, Chris Luttrell, who was another admitted teenage witch in Crittenden County, were part of a highly publicized polyamory.
MTV.
Polyamory, I was going to say couple. It's not a couple when you got three people, but there was this. Shane had married this girl, and she now considered Chris Luttrell to also be her husband, and she was mad because they're taking her daughter away from her, and got a lot of publicity. And
before the baby was taken away, they were on MTV as a happy couple.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And they were openly practicing pagans at that point. And with polyamory being touted as one of the, suitable arrangements under Wicca. And, Eccles we're sort of wandering here, but Eccles has notoriously done his own polyamory thing not too long ago with a tattoo artist in Lori and celebrated it on Facebook. Pretty soon after this tour they did with these love letters expressing undying love and devotion to each other. And, then they're running around with a tattooed lady. So,
it's interesting, too, because so many of the supporters try to portray anybody who believes the evidence and the confessions and the polygraphs and the witnesses and everything. Anybody who believes the facts of this case must be some kind of right-wing Christian who's in the Bible Belt and against. But here you got Damien Eccles, Dina Holcomb's boyfriend, who's now a pagan himself, and he was a witness against Eccles. So many of the witnesses against Eccles are co-religious and also occultists along with the same faith as Eccles.
Yeah, well, yeah, apparently, except they actually, none of them had much good to say about Eccles. Right. Murray Ferris and Chris Luttrell weren't the only kids that were connected with the occult in Crittenden County at that time, but they were the ones that the police talked to because they did have associations with Eccles, and neither one of them thought highly of, and they both were admitted Wiccans. They had this thing called the Covenant of Divine Light. Eccles claimed membership in this, but they said, no, he's really not one of us. They really didn't want to have anything to do with him. And, Ferris said he didn't, he gave off the wrong vibe or something. He didn't say that exactly, but it was something along those lines. And Ferris was also witness this. They both described Eccles bragging about torturing animals and so on and so forth, which they weren't approving of. So they had nothing good to say about him. But there were occultists in the area, and you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that from reading. I don't think it's even mentioned in Devil's Knot, and you're not going to hear. I haven't heard anything like that on Bob Ruff's podcast. They make it sound like the police just made up all this stuff up out of the air, and it's simply not the case. Eccles was heavily involved in the occult, and just absolutely obsessed with horror movies, dressing in black, the Salem witch trials, which involved torture, binding, throwing people into water, etc., had been for years. He watched horror movies. Apparently the big family activity was staying up really late watching horror movies. And his parents are pretty strange, to put it mildly. But
getting back to the the pentagram on his chest. You know, William Ramsey's done some videos on that where you can see a faint pentagram when he does like an overlay. But even without the pentagrams in those pictures, he's mimicking Aleister Crowley in those pictures. His body positions are positions from photographs of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, there's one in particular that he had on his Facebook page for a long time, which is a profile picture with him doing a strange claw-like gesture with his hand that is directly mimics Aleister Crowley. It's the only photo I've ever seen that even faintly. It's the only photo I've ever seen that even faintly resembles what Eccles was doing on the page, and it's the exact duplicate, except I think perhaps he's facing right and Crowley's facing left. I don't really know about that, but right. I think Crowley's facing right and Eccles is facing left, I think, but I could be wrong.
So now, on the Bob Ruff podcast, has there been any mention whatsoever about Exhibit 500 and Damien Eccles' extensive mental incarceration?
In a very, yes, in a certain sense, in that they did talk about this, as I said, they talked about this trip to St. Vincent's in Oregon, but it was mischaracterized as, Eccles checking him in because he couldn't get along with his parents, and, as if there wasn't any violence threatened or anything like that. And, and then he just, and it was mischaracterized, put it nicely.
A dispute over which horror movie to watch.
and I think he probably has mentioned, but briefly, Eccles, I believe he has mentioned the trips to Carter, but I don't believe he's explained the circumstances with, threats to kill police and parents and to kill himself and drinking, lapping up blood from another kid. I haven't heard a lot about Eccles' habit of blood, well-documented practice of drinking blood to gain godlike powers, according to, his occult beliefs. I mean, it's talked about quite a bit in the record, and I haven't heard, if it's been mentioned, I don't remember it. And that's a significant thing. One of the psychiatrists who testified said that it was very unusual and very disturbing to hear this from someone. And, it speaks to the psychology of people involved. And supporters will say, well, I drank a little blood when I was a kid.
I know. I love those, man. Oh, I lost my kids too. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I tortured animals when I was a kid. But, no big deal.
Wait. And then they'll say, but I never killed anybody. And then we found out that one of them did kill somebody. Okay. We found out way back when we were debating back on the westmemphis3.org, one of the biggest supporters, well, she didn't actually kill anybody, but her ex-husband or ex-boyfriend showed up at the strip joint where she was working and shot himself on the doorstep of the strip club. And she was always going on about, oh, well, I wore black and I listened to Metallica. Oh, yeah, I drank a little blood. Oh, yeah, a little by a little. But anyway, we got to take another commercial break here with Gary Meece. And I want to point out one more thing, too, before we take a break. If you listen to this, Gary Meece knows this case backwards and forwards, okay? And so does William Ramsey. And I can kind of chug along. I've been following it since it was going on the Usenet back in the 90s. But you notice how we don't have to add any kind of dramatic music or any kind of, any special effects or anything like that. Just the meat and bones, the facts of the case, man. The meat and potatoes, not the bones. That's Eccles' line of work. We'll be right back with more of Gary Meece, the case against the West Memphis 3 killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. More on that. And now a word from our sponsors.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all those kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Subhash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also awakeradio.us.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap. I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Gary Meece, author of a couple of books. One was Where the Monsters Go, and the other one was Blood on Black, both about the West Memphis 3 case. And now there's a compilation, a condensed version, the case against the West Memphis 3 killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. You know, Gary, we're talking about blood drinking and all this kind of stuff. And we can't, when we talk about the blood drinking, we can't leave out Dominique Tier, whose cousin was at the time the spokesperson for all of the vampires in Transylvania. The spokesperson, she had a magazine about it, and claimed as herself that her parents, her whole family drank blood. There's nothing wrong with it. I drink blood. My mother drinks blood. We all drink blood. And had just returned from a trip from her cousin, the super vampire over there, who had garbage in her garbage pail, stuff about music to sacrifice children to, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. Has that been mentioned in the Truth and Justice podcast?
No, no. I guess he's mentioned Dominique from time to time. She did come up in some of the alibi talk, and also he devoted 3 episodes to what he called the Hollingsworth clan, why he didn't call it the Hollingsworth family but calls it instead the Hollingsworth clan says something about his mindset with this and those folks in particular, which is that they're some sort of, hideous little group of people. But
the Clampets.
the Clampets and being sort of probably a redneck myself, I take umbrage at this. But anyway, and I'm sure most of our listeners, the listeners who are going to be hating on me will use that. You can call me those names all day long. I don't care. I'm kind of proud of it. But they did focus somewhat on Dominique because she was cited as with Eccles by the Hollingsworth, said that she was cited with Eccles on walking along the side of the road on the night the murders occurred at 9:30 or so at night, and she did have an alibi. I can't say it was really, really strong, but she was home with her mother. She was asleep at home with her mother and apparently gone to sleep in her mother's bed. And so her mother was there with her all evening while she was asleep. Now, the girl was pregnant. She probably did sleep a lot. I think I have no reason to think she was actively involved in the commission of the murders. She's not mentioned in that respect in Jesse Miskelly's many confessions. But whether she was on the side of the road at 9:30 with Eccles, I believe Narlene Hollingsworth sincerely believes she saw Dominique there. I've talked to Narlene as recently as 2013, I think. And she told essentially the same story that she's always told about this. She's very consistent in the details. And it's interesting, Ruff picks apart her statements based on little inconsistencies like who she remembered in this, being along on this trip. Well, she didn't take a roll call before they got in the car. And, it was just an informal trip. Her family all hopped in the car and took an informal trip to pick up a relative, sort of relative, Dixie Hufford at the laundromat on Ingram Boulevard. And Ruff made a big deal about it. It was a Ford Escort. It was a station wagon, Ford Escort. And how could all those people fit into a Ford Escort? And then he made a really big deal about the fact that it was on a school night. It was a Wednesday night, 9:30 at night or so, but he acted as if all the little Hollingsworth were these little scholars at home who just were, going to be scribbling in their notebooks at 9:30 at night. I guess, I don't know what his thought was, but, I've seen families packed into cars riding around town many, many, many times. I don't find anything strange about it. Later confessed. He later admitted, they could have all squeezed in there. It just would have been real tight. Well, yeah, it would have been. No doubt about it. But it's not impossible to get those people in a car. And even not that challenging. It's just very crowded. And that's sort of typical. He casts aspersions on people and tries to downplay the Hollingsworth. And he spent three episodes, really more than that. His thing is he's done 21 episodes, but he does a Friday follow-up, which is in fact sort of another episode that takes reader comments and listener comments and so forth, and goes back over that. And that's been very problematic because he allows very controversial and really wrong-headed ideas. He airs them and then doesn't really shoot them down as, let's not be going there with this. Suggesting, for instance, that L.G. Hollingsworth and Richard Simpson were, viable suspects in the killings just because they acted strangely, they were secretive, they weren't consistent in their stories, but there's no evidence tying them to the scene of the crime at all. L.G. Hollingsworth, who was Narlene's Narlene's ex-husband's son, but she was never his stepmother, as Bob Ruff has said repeatedly. She was never his stepmother. Nothing suggests that she ever was. She divorced. She and LG's father had divorced many years before, and she was married to LG's father's brother. This is real complicated, but that doesn't make him her stepson. Anyway, they said that LG was in the that he was at the laundromat, the same laundromat they were going to get the Dominique's number that evening. This does tie back to Dominique. It's never really explained. I think it's a good question. Why was LG going to get her number? He just talked to her that day, and he talked to her. He just seen her that day. He saw her the next day. And it's 9:30 at night, and he's going in there to get her phone number. She says she didn't get any phone calls at home that evening except from Damian Eccles. And LG is he's another one of these people who never could get his story straight and caused immense problems for himself by just simply not being straightforward with the police. But there's no evidence he was actually connected with the crime. But this reader suggested that he was. Bob sort of went along with it. Oh, yeah, I don't know why they weren't looking more closely at them. But more outrageously, he suggested that Anthony Hollingsworth, who was in the car with Narlene and testified at Eccles and Baldwin's trial, he suggested because Anthony had a sex abuse charge against him, that he should have been a suspect. And there's no evidence that he's connected to the crime in any way, except that he saw the killer walking along the side of the road. And I'm certainly not excusing sexual child abuse. I'm just saying, or the abusers. I'm just simply saying there was no reason just because of that he would be a suspect when he's got some alibis. They talked to a lot of child sexual molesters in the investigation. It was a pretty routine standard practice. If you don't mind, Bob, I want to.
I'm Ed. Wait, whoa, don't call me Bob. I'm Ed. What were you going to say? Yeah.
Did I get Bob? Oh,
go. Now that's a low blow.
I have Bob Ruff on my brain.
I know.
Because you're Ed. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He spends a total of 6 hours, more or less, on the Hollingsworth family. He spent the episode plus the follow-up. So he spent 2 hours on Mr. Bojangles. And we learned that something that anybody who's actually been out there and looked at it or even looks at a picture would know, which is that there's no way that somebody can feasibly walk along the 10-mile bayou from Robin Hood Hills, where the boys were killed, to Bojangles Restaurant on Missouri Street, down that canal, because it would just be too treacherous. It's too deep. It's muddy. It's the banks are steep. It's possible to do that, but not in the time allotted, and certainly not for Mr. Bojangles to have done it.
No, that's a good 5-6 hour hike, man. 10 miles. Yeah.
You could even do it.
Yeah.
You could even do it.
With the proper boots and stuff, and a hiking pole, I hike. Yeah. I hike every day. I hike all the time. So.
Well, but you're not hiking through a muddy ditch with holes in it that has. They do have turtles there, so there's that hazard. There's all sorts of junk on the bottom. I mean,
sure,
it's not something any sane person would undertake. And I don't think Mr. Bojangles was necessarily sane. I don't know what was wrong with him, but people have made a big deal, and this has come up in the commentary with Ruff about the police officer Regina Meek not investigating Mr. Bojangles more thoroughly. Well, the problem is he'd already left the scene. She looked for him. She couldn't find him. He disappeared in the murky stuff behind Bojangles Restaurant, and it's still murky back there. Well, I hadn't been over there in a month or two, but or like 6 months. But unless something's changed, it's still not a place that you would just go eat. It would be that easy to find somebody who didn't want to be found. and she had other things on her plate. She was answering routine police calls. So, and she'd already just taken her report on about these missing boys. And that was more of a priority than a guy messing up a fast food restaurant.
Right.
And, you know, in retrospect, you wish that had been handled better, but that's hindsight.
Yeah, but you want to know something else? In the average murder trial, that wouldn't even have made it to the trial. You know, what about this other suspect? You know, because usually you have something to work on. You know, you have some kind, you know, you have a defense, you know? But this, they're just throwing everything up at the wall, see what sticks, and they come up with this guy at a chicken restaurant 10 miles away, you know, and you bring that in. So in a normal trial, this wouldn't even be up for discussion, you know, and your average murder conviction, this wouldn't even come up. But here, and then when they show it on a reality TV show on HBO, now everybody's an expert. And, well, this has to be it. And how come they didn't investigate? And they make a whole big freaking deal out of it. And this is what I do for defense. You throw over, well, how can we punch holes in this case? How can we point this at someone else? Well, come up with this. And even that would be something I would look at and say, that's kind of stretching it. You know, but in this case, it somehow made it in there. And then they put it on TV and people take it. And this guy gives how many hours to it?
He gives basically 2 hours to it. It's just not worth 2 hours. It's not worth 2 hours to spend on Chris Morgan and Brian Holland, who were two young men who had moved out, who apparently knew the boys. At least I think Chris did, and they'd moved out to California, and they somehow ended up on the radar list of people who might be persons of interest. The police in California got a little zealous in their questioning and kept it. And I think Morgan did fail a polygraph. I haven't really studied that aspect closely, but I think that's the case. But they spent, you know, you hear about Jesse Miskelly's so-called 12-hour confession, which was a fraction of that time that went on. But this really was a very long, protracted interrogation by the police in California. And at one point, Chris Morgan gets frustrated and says, "Oh yeah, I killed him." And then he immediately retracts it and said, "That's just what you want to hear." And, you know, and I don't know how anybody could really take that too seriously, but it was serious enough that they were going to try to use him in court to prove that maybe he was actually the suspect. And, but there was very little evidence that he was, other than, you know, anyway.
Yeah. When I brought up,
he spent an hour on that and another hour on the follow up. So he's wasting time.
Yeah, when I brought up all the failed polygraphs in this case, like you would, even if you don't believe in polygraphs, so they're 80% accurate. But even if you don't believe in polygraphs, in this case, every single person who passed the polygraph would have had to have been. It would have to be 100% in reverse. You know what I mean? Everybody who failed. You know, and when I mentioned that, right away he brought up the two guys. You're talking about that went to California. That's the first thing he brought up. And he says, "Well, they failed the polygraph." You know.
Yeah, I mean, he said, look at all the people that have failed the polygraph. Well, the people that failed the polygraph included Damien Echols, Jesse Miskelly, L.G. Hollingsworth, and Deanna Holcomb failed one question, which was, "Do you know who did the killings?" And they both admitted they lied about, or they said no, and they were sure enough about Damien Echols. They named specifically that he was the culprit, that it showed up as a lie on the polygraph. Trying to remember, Ken Watkins, I believe Echols confessed to him. He didn't make it to Ron Lax basically scared him out of being a prosecution witness like he did Buddy Lucas and William Jones. But he failed a polygraph that indicated that Echols had told him about Echols' involvement in the killings. Ken Watkins was around all those people that day. He spent virtually the whole day up until right before the killings went on with either Jason Baldwin, Dominique, or Damien. So he was privy, you know, he was one of their little followers. but Ruff talks about all the people that failed, but most of the people that failed were pointing to Eccles. And that's a fact. And there were other potential suspects who were, they talked to a lot of people, and there were some people that were, a bunch of young, violent punks, and, we don't need to name their names because maybe they're not such young. They're not so young anymore. Maybe they're grown up a little bit, but they passed the polygraph. They had either really good alibis or some sort of believable alibi. They were let go. Ray Ferris and Chris Burrell were almost immediately, they were almost immediately free from the suspicion because they had a really beautiful alibi, which is that they had some sort of youth revival that evening. Just may seem strange, but that's where they were. And you got a minister who has no reason to lie about that, saying that's where they were. So they were consistent in their story. We heard almost nothing about them, and you just don't get the feeling. This is all, according to Ruff, this is all stuff that Jerry Driver was making up about these animal sacrifices and ritual sites and so forth. They had a guy come over from, I can't remember his name, but I can't pronounce his name, probably is more to the point, but he came over from Little Rock at their invitation the year before because there were concerns about what they thought were occult signs and so forth around West Memphis. And he saw sites that he considered to be, occult signs, particularly the Dab School, which later burned down. But there was chalk markings and so forth.
Was that Dr. Dale Griffiths?
That was not Dr. Dale Griffiths. It was Rick. I think his last name starts with an N, but I can't remember it.
Okay.
I've never pronounced it. Dale Griffiths was, for some reason, pulled up in the Ruff's podcast, and I think that was the latest episode, or maybe I think it was the latest episode. But anyway, Dale Griffiths, he spends, no, it wasn't. It was way back, but Griffiths. He spends a whole hour basically just letting Griffiths talk. And, you can come to various conclusions about Griffiths, but I pretty much agreed with the jury's assessment, which was his delivery was poor. It was kind of failed to connect the ideas, but he did seem to know what he was talking about. And Griffiths didn't really have a lot of knowledge about the case per se. He was there more about the occult ideas, and his ideas that he expressed about the ritual sacrifice of young boys as a means of gaining power is almost word for word what Eccles had told police. And it's almost word for word what Alistair Crowley had told. He hadn't told police, but Alistair Crowley wrote about extensively. Eccles now says that he has been a devotee, or at least the last time I checked, he was a devotee of the Golden Dawn, which is this society that was not founded by Aleister Crowley, but he pretty much took it over, that was involved in all these magical practices back in the 19th century, really around the turn of the century. And that he's been fascinated and involved with these Thelemite ideas expressed by Crowley since he was 12 years old. So the idea that all this is silly and, whether there was in fact an explicit occult motivation for the killings or not, I don't think it can be one way or the other. But there are things that lend themselves to a reasonable interpretation that, in fact, at least some of the motivation was occult in nature.
Well, Eccles actually, when he was in prison and he was claiming to be a Buddhist, he was actually the prison ministry he was a member of what was a Crowley prison ministry. Yeah.
The OTO, the Otis,
right?
Oriental. I can't.
The OTO. And the other thing too is that he had donated so many books of his occult books to this OTO group down there in Arkansas that they named the library after him down there. So there's no, right. Yeah. By the way, this hasn't come out voluntarily. We dragged this out of them. People found this information and then we broadcast it on the air. But now, real quick though, you're saying that Ruff did have Dale Griffiths on his show?
He he played. He didn't. Oh no! This is what's interesting. He could call Dale Griffiths and say, "Why don't you come on the show and let's talk to us?" Or he could call Dominique. I mean, he doesn't. He hasn't made any. He could call Narlene. He said he didn't. You know, we'd heard enough from Narlene. He didn't need to talk to her. Somebody asked him, "Have you talked to Narlene?" Well, I don't need to talk to her now because I got what she said back in 1993.
Well, that's interesting, because he came on my show and he started making snide comments about Dr. Dale Griffiths. And I explained to him, I said, well, first of all, Dr. Dale Griffiths was a police captain and he was a professor, college professor. He taught criminal justice in college. This guy's credentials are impeccable. And I did the last interview with Dr. Dale Griffiths, and Bob Ruff could have purchased that interview. It's available. I can look at the downloads and see. I haven't seen the name Bob Ruff on there. He did contact me and try and get Dale Griffiths didn't want to go on the show. He told me, but the thing is, he could have made an effort before trashing Dr. Dale Griffiths to listen to the show, the interview I did. I did 2 hours with the man, and he went over extensively over his education and his background and his credentials and stuff. He was, wanted to make a serious point of clarifying that.
Well, I think you can make a really good argument that he wasn't that effective simply because the jury wasn't they didn't find him that impressive as far as his testimony. But he did provide some background to understanding Eccles' mindset that probably hasn't been sufficiently acknowledged. And the other thing is they make a big deal. Oh, he had this self-directed course that he took from this mail order school. And, which is true. However, how many colleges can you go to and take a course in the investigation of occult crime? Maybe that's there now, but as Griffiths pointed out in his testimony, it wasn't available. Nothing like that was available at the time he professed an interest in this. So he did the best he could with the resources he had, which is a self-directed college, and I think that's where he got his PhD, but I could be wrong about that.
No, he's got another PhD for psychology.
Well, yeah. It's not as if he's some kook that's totally off the wall with this.
Exactly.
And that's how he's portrayed on this. Everybody that doesn't conform to Bob Ruff's view of this case gets written off as either basically ignorant. He hadn't used the term redneck, I don't think, but I think that's pretty much where he's going with that. Or potential suspects or insane. I mean, he has nothing good to say about anybody on the other end of this. He trashed John Fogelman, who's now a judge and was the prosecutor then, and said that Fogelman, in Vicki Hutchinson's testimony, or not her story, I think she said it in the testimony. I'm sure she said it in the testimony as well. In the Miskelly case, she didn't even testify in Eccles Baldwin. She said that Damien had driven her to this in a red car to this SBOT, which is a witchy gathering, a Wicca gathering, or an occult gathering up in Turl and Turl Twist, which is up in North Trenton County. And Ruff said that John Fogelman had knowingly elicited false testimony because he knew Eccles couldn't drive. Well, Eccles didn't have a driver's license, and we know he routinely did not drive. Let's stipulate all that, okay? It's fact. That's all true. Did he know whether did he know how to drive? We don't know that. And we have reason to think that maybe he could, just simply because most 18-year-olds at least have some driving skills. The other thing is he says he had a red car. Well, we don't know, and Eccles didn't have access to a red car. And he puts this out as fact. Well, the fact is we don't know what Eccles had access to. He had friends and he had associations, and it's quite possible somebody could have lent him a car. Do I put a lot of credibility in Vicki Hutchinson's testimony? No. And, he spent she's not that credible. She was stoned out of her mind at the time of the trial and really just a very troubled woman. She was a vital link that connected Miskelly, that got Miskelly to Damien and caused the police to talk to Miskelly, which broke open the case. She knew the boys. Her son was friends with the boys that were killed. He seemed to be a promising witness, and we spent an hour on Ruff did on Aaron Hutchinson and played back really kind of sad, pathetic statements, recorded statements from Aaron. And he's just making, it's clear he's just making things up. I mean, we didn't need a short 10-minute segment of him talking about pulling out pistols and shooting and jumping out of trees and so on and so forth. And you would know this is an 8-year-old making up stories, but we spent an hour on that, plus another hour, in the follow-up. And I'm not saying that the Hutchinsons are irrelevant to the case, because they're not. But to spend a total of 4 hours on them is ridiculous. What's really ridiculous is Ruff spent, I think he had 3 or 4 episodes total about the activities of what he called the Forgotten West Memphis 3 that day. Well, I like the fact that I think I would commend him for the fact that he wanted to call attention to Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, and Christopher Byers, and gives his listeners some idea of what these little boys were like, what they hoped for and dreamed for, et cetera, what their family situation was, et cetera, et cetera. And, as part of a police investigation, you want to canvass the area. And the police didn't do a perfect job in West Memphis. They should have done a better canvass than they did. I think that's a valid criticism, but they did talk to a lot of neighbors. They did go door to door, and he spends 2 or 3 episodes tracing their activities to no point. I mean, it really is not that relevant to the case where Stevie and Michael were riding their bicycles at 4:00 in the afternoon. But he says, we don't have any. He'll say, we don't know where Chris was from 4 to 5, as if that's, I don't know, but it was basically he was missing. He wasn't around nobody can account for him for about an hour, I think. Well, he's an 8-year-old boy. He might have just been doodling around in the backyard and nobody saw him. Big deal. Spends a lot of time on stuff like that. Then he ends this whole thing with a couple of things. He pulls up, he doesn't say where these came from, but there were some witnesses that came forward, I think in 2009, who claimed that Terry Hobbs had been yelling at the boys in front of their house at 6 or 6:30 that evening. First anybody's heard about it since 1993. And there's no reason to think they have any particular credibility at this point. Ruff quotes them as if they're an authoritative source. And then he describes the boys going into the woods, says they looked like they were fleeing somebody. Not an exact quote, but they, the idea was they were apprehensive. They were hiding from somebody. There's no evidence suggesting that. He is making stuff up, and he does this constantly. This business with Fogelman, he's really slandering a prosecutor and judge, saying he knowingly elicited false testimony. And then he says that, more ridiculously, he says that Vicki Hollingsworth, she mentioned this Asbot, and Ruff states that, this is obvious. It's obvious the police are feeding her this information. Number one, I had some dealings with West Memphis, the Marion Police Department. I'm pretty sure now and then that none of them had any idea about Wiccan beliefs and practices, including Asbot. How they would be the source of that, I have no idea. There's the obvious conclusion from this is that she heard this and she had to look it up. So this proves that the police were feeding her information. I would contend it more likely proves that Jesse or Damien used a word she wasn't familiar with, so she looked it up. Mm. There's no evidence to suggest otherwise.
This is a good time to take a break.
Yeah.
Got this something by your throat, man. Yeah, there's some warm water you got to drink, man.
Is it that bad?
No. But I can tell when it starts getting tired. Anyway, we're here with Gary Meece. Excellent narration here of the facts of this case. It's a pleasure to listen to you, man, because it brings back memories, from years and years ago when I was obsessed with this thing too and reading all the police reports. And just Gary has it all on the tip of his tongue. So it's a blessing to have you on the show. The case against the West Memphis 3 killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. We're talking mostly about just critiquing and pointing out some of the errors and chicanery. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi folks, Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subhash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subhash Technosis by email at info@subhashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow. Shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. We're here with Gary Meece, author of the book, just came out, April 15th. The case against the West Memphis Street Killer is condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. Gary, one thing I just remembered when you were talking is I asked Bob Ruff, I says, well, how would Jesse Miskelly know if he's going to go in there and make up this confession? How would he know to make it up about Eccles and Baldwin? How did he know that they didn't have alibis? How would he pick them? And he said to me, well, as soon as Miskelly sat down, there was a picture of Alec Eccles right behind the interrogator. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, I don't know where maybe there was, but I've never heard of it.
I've never heard that before either, yeah.
And, speaking of this, Ruff has made the point repeatedly. In fact, he devoted a great deal of one episode to the fact that he said basically that Baldwin and Eccles were friends, but they barely knew Jesse Miskelly. And then he spends a great deal of time talking about all these sightings of people linking them with Jesse Miskelly. And then at the end, he said, I conclude from all this that they're just barely acquaintances. Well, if you've got all these people talking about before the arrest, I think. But anyway, Deanna Holcomb said that Damien hung out with Jason and Jesse. And she would know. She said he only had friends, Joey Lang, Jason, and Jesse. And then he says that he's talked to Baldwin, and Baldwin has told him, we haven't heard anything from Baldwin on this show, but he brings this up as Baldwin says, well, he just barely knew Jesse Miskelly. And Damien routinely downplays he did ask Damien, and he played that part of the interview where he said, oh, he's just somebody I saw around town. I didn't know him that well. Well, Baldwin said in a statement from prison that he said, I thought we were friends, talking about Jesse Miskelly. In the Dark Spell, Mara Leverett's book, that's all about little Jason and his heroic struggles in the Arkansas prison system, which is like a really, I read it, and it's almost as a comic piece, though I'm sure, with a lot of insights into Jason's character, and none of it looks that good, except he is a little scarier than I would have thought prior to reading it. Mm-hmm. He's bragging about how tough he is and how he took on all these people in fights, and basically it describes how he worked the system. And I guess this is a good thing in her eyes. But anyway, and he says in that book that he played with Miskelly a great deal. They hung out together a great deal in 8th and 9th grades and got to be pretty good friends. Now, how that equates to, he has an opportunity here, and play on the air. He could ask, Jason, if you say you barely knew Miskelly then, but you state elsewhere that you were pretty good friends with him, which way is it? He doesn't do anything like that. He doesn't bring. He's chosen not to bring in a lot of new witnesses or old witnesses revisited that he could call and ask, and maybe he's asked some of them and they've turned him down. I will agree. It's hard to get people to talk about this because they've been burned so many times. I don't blame them. But, he could have gone and talked to Baldwin. He could have gone and talked to Darlene, for instance. That wouldn't have been a problem. Jason's old girlfriend, Heather Clyatt's still around. He could have talked to her. Dominique, he could have at least tried to talk to her, et cetera, et cetera. They're not that hard to find. And they would clear up some things.
He told me that he did visit Miskelly. He went to visit Miskelly at his house. Because right around that time, it was right around the time of the traffic ticket for Miskelly.
Yes.
And I mentioned that, his neighbor, that woman, Henderson, who saw him every day. Her kids go fishing with Miss Kelly every day. And he spends time at her house, she told me. And she described him as not stupid, a very smart man. Which kind of, throws out the whole retarded, can't stop confessing because he's retarded. Suddenly now he's a very smart man. He's not stupid. And when I mentioned that to Ruff, right away he says, oh no, I met Miskelly at his trailer and there's something off with him. There's something off with him. So he has went and talked to Miskelly.
I know, but he didn't produce anything from that encounter.
Right.
In fact, we didn't even know about it until you asked him about it. But
interesting.
I know Miskelly. I still have some contacts over in West Memphis. Miskelly had called the local newspaper and said he wanted to do an interview one afternoon. So the reporter goes over there the next day, and Miskelly, I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't talking to you. And the father basically runs the guy out, and it's he's got something wrong with him. I'm not sure at this point that it may not be chemically induced because there have been those kind of allegations. Frankly, he doesn't look, those pictures, he doesn't look well. He doesn't look like a well man. He doesn't look, Eccles doesn't look particularly healthy, but he does look, at least recently, and Baldwin looks pretty healthy. So Skelly does that. Problematic, really.
Probably guilt, he seems to be the only one that has a conscience.
Yes, he I would say that he is. My contention is the other two form what's known as a pathological dyad, where they feed off each other in really negative ways. Very much like Leopold and Loeb, or the Columbine shooters, or even the two little boys in Jonesboro that shot up the school back in the 90s, the Hillside Stranglers, et cetera, et cetera. Right. It's not an unknown, Bonnie and Clyde. It's not an unknown phenomenon. It's just something that's not fully understood. What I was going to say is he brought on Michael Moore's sister, Dawn, she was 9. She might have been 9 or 10 at the time of the killings. And she did give a brief statement to police where she described being sent out to chase Michael down for dinner, and he just rode his bicycle away and didn't pay any attention to her. About like you'd expect an 8-year-old boy to do when his bigger sister comes calling for him. And but then this is really gratuitous. It was very offensive. He got into a lot of family business with the Moores that really didn't bear on the case in any particular way, except the fact that they're the boy died unwillingly in the public because of this. And it was excruciating to listen to. I really felt sorry even for the girl that was on there, because there was a family dispute going on at the time. She was upset about that, so she takes it out on them by going on a national podcast and bad-mouthing her parents. I don't know about you, but, it's not unusual for parents and their offspring to have my own personal experience. There's often some conflicts there, and you really just don't want them publicly aired.
Well,
and
Gary,
it serves a purpose. And but he brings on her. She adds nothing to the story. She can't really recall what she did or didn't do back in 1993. So he brings on just to stir up listener interest, but he had an opportunity to bring on he has still the opportunity to bring on real witnesses and talk about real aspects of the case in a meaningful, intelligent, and measured way. And he's failed to do that.
I got to say something, just about 25, 35% of the times you have a guest on your show, no matter what the topic is, you'll get an email later on. Say, I'm his ex-wife. I'm his stepdaughter. Let me tell you about the real guy. Let me come on your show and tell you what this guy's really like. So that kind of thing happens all the time. You could do shows, I could fill, 100 hours a week with disgruntled ex-wives and unhappy kids and ex-employees of guests that have been on the show. So that's low-hanging fruit by anybody's, yeah.
I would agree. And I had the same experience in the journalism business, which is,
right.
You write a story about somebody's going to, not all the time. It's almost a daily thing. Somebody's going to call you and talk about badmouth the person you quoted or talked to in the most horrible kind of way.
Right.
And you just take it for what it's worth, which is somebody's disgruntled and they're trying to find a venue. And, honestly, that's how you work sources with government officials. It usually comes from people who have grudges and dislikes, and you just have to temper that with, some objective checking of facts to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, it's just a grudge match.
Exactly. Right. Grudges. Yeah.
You don't want to go there.
Right.
But he did go there, and it's really shameless. Just as his comments about Fogelman are shameless and really kind of disgusting. And he doesn't mean to, he continually, he has this, I think he has an EMT, a firefighter background. So you think he'd work with these guys a lot, but he really never has anything good to say about police investigation. And let's concede that West Memphis police did not do a perfect job on the case. There are lots of things that went wrong, and there's lots of things in retrospect. Gosh, I wish they'd done that. I wish they'd talked to so-and-so and so-and-so. They worked very hard. They were working, I wonder how much time they were putting in, but they must have been, 70, 80-hour weeks that they were putting in for months at a time, trying to find out what went on, trying to build a case, they checked out just a long list of potential suspects. And, but early on, Damien Echols got on the radar, not because of Jerry Driver. Well, Steve Jones. Yeah, Steve Jones did sort of alert them. This is the kind of thing. But he makes a big deal out of Steve Jones, and he throws in this gratuitous thing about Steve Jones was going out with a Fogelman relative, so maybe that's why he didn't testify. He has no evidence of that. And I got to tell you, go to Marion, Arkansas, there are lots of Fogelman relatives there. They've been there for 150 years, and they're fairly large families. They're all over the place, and and they're really sort of the upper echelon of the area over there. So they're well respected. It's not as if he didn't call them the Klan.
Right. I say whoever came up with the Hollingsworth Klan, whoever first came up with that back in one of those old message boards, I'd say they must be really patting themselves on the back. A little slight of a little slight there.
It's a dig.
Yeah,
and it's something that's easy to get away with. And there is these convoluted family connections there that really do leave you shaking your head going, wow. But, it doesn't mean they didn't see what they said they saw. And Damien's attorney had the opportunity to, punch holes in their case. He could have asked, how many people can you get in a Ford Escort station wagon? And, run a test. Bob Ruff could have run a test. He could have gotten his friends and neighbors to all climb into 82 Ford Escort and say, there's just no way you could pack all these people in this thing. He didn't do that. I don't blame him for not doing that, but, lay off of it unless you got something to really prove. And he didn't. It's this sort of shameless picking away at details. I think the bigger problem here is that he's got this narrative that he's formed that is, it all leads away. His business with Echols has this ironclad alibi, so we don't need to look at him anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, it leads away from where the case actually is and should be, off into some la-la land where he's going to spend enormous amounts of time on pointless peripheral characters in the case and not actually get down to figuring out what, from his own standard, what actually went on. And he probably would come up with a different conclusion than I did, but at least based it on something like fact and not throws out all these speculations and, that we have to surmise that so-and-so happened. And I think that's what they were thinking was this. There's a lot of this. I mean, his podcasts are littered with speculations. It's just, I could spend 12 hours going down the list of things that he gets wrong or mischaracterizes. And some of it's stupid stuff. He talks about L.G. Hollingsworth working at the Big Star, and he says, well, I think there's only one Big Star in town. All you got to do is Go to Google. Yeah, they've had two big stars in West Memphis for decades. One east, big star East, big star West. It's not that complicated. You don't have to, it doesn't require a big investigation. But instead, he runs his mouth and he says things that just simply aren't true or are totally unsubstantiated. Did I say runs his big mouth? Well, did, and he does. I would say he's got a good radio voice, kind of a huckster. It has a huckster feel to it, but, it's certainly a better voice than mine for radio or whatever this is on format podcast. He's got a good radio voice. As you know, Ed, that's not necessarily a compliment, but his delivery is good.
And then you add in the music and stuff like that. It's produced. Yeah, a lot of dramatic music. And the thing is, too, see, the longer he can drag this out, and he's getting funding from this, he's getting donations, he's getting a Patreon, and there's plenty of supporters out there who have nothing to do now because, all the message boards are pretty much dead and boring. So now they're all moving on to podcasts and sit around listening to this. And what else is going to work on, too? I mean, if you leave West Memphis Street, what big case is out there to pick up next? You know what I mean? This has a built-in audience, and you could just milk it out for another couple of months. Let's take a little commercial break here. With Gary Meece, The Case Against the West Memphis Street Killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. Great fact-based reporting here from a longtime news journalist, a real reporter, and Memphis Appeal there. We'll be right back with more of Gary Meece after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap. I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpent Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you can get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Gary Meece from the case of the West Memphis 3 killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. We're talking about the case, but also too about this kind of a deceptive podcast out there, Bob Ruff. Now, has he mentioned it? One thing that really sticks out at me is the softball girls. If you read all the police reports with the softball girls, it's just because Damien's out there bragging about it. We got 3 more picked out. Does Bob Ruff get into the softball girls at all?
I don't think he's there yet. I don't recall him discussing that. I think he may have, he's talked for about 40 hours about the case now. So he probably alluded to it at some point, but he certainly hasn't gone to it in depth. I can, based on what he's done earlier, I can just imagine how he's going to pick apart those stories. I think the linchpin of his whole show is this episode where he determined that, I think it did 2 episodes on it, plus the follow-up, so like 4, about Damien Echols having an ironclad alibi.
Right.
And he names 9 people. Well, 2 of the people were family friends he goes to great lengths to prove this. I'm not sure it's completely proven, but I'm not sure it makes any difference. They say they were at this casino, Splash Casino down in Tunica at the time of that evening. And if they're proved to be at the casino, how does that provide an alibi for Echols? It doesn't. The phone call girls, Jennifer, there's 3 or 4 of them, depending on who you want to believe. Dominique says she talked to Damien after 10 o'clock. There's quite a bit of evidence suggesting that conversation actually went on, just because the story is pretty consistent. But that doesn't provide an alibi. Jennifer Bearden, who was Echols' other girlfriend, who was just kind of disgustingly enough, he's 18, she's 12.
Right.
She says she didn't talk to him from around 3:30 in the afternoon. I think she talked briefly to Baldwin and Echols around 3:30 or 4:30 or so at Baldwin's trailer. And she didn't talk to Echols again until at least 9:20, maybe later. That's not an alibi. Heather Clyett says she didn't talk to Baldwin at all that evening and has given really very contradictory stories, including that she had some sort of late night freeway phone chat with Damien and Jason that evening. I asked her about her discrepancies and she blew up and, threatened to sue me and so on and so forth. I really asked all these people about this, and most of them just ignore the questions. Holly George says she didn't talk to him that evening. She only talked to him briefly during the day. None of the girls provided an alibi. Echols' family, his dad couldn't say he went over to the Sanders family, their family friend, the Sanders, home with them for a brief visit with the family. The parents weren't there. So his dad doesn't provide an alibi. His mother gives a very inconsistent story about her husband and her breaking up and her husband leaving the house the next day, leaving her house the day before the killings. And Damien was very upset about it. Later, she changes the story and says, well, it occurred on that day. but there's no it was just a few days later that she's talking to the police, and it just the whole thing didn't make any sense. It couldn't be reconciled. The thing she'd said, it couldn't be reconciled. And Michelle, his sister, who I talked to when West of Memphis came out, she sticks to her story, and she's been pretty consistent. That Damien was along, and they went over there and they watched 90210 at the Sanders home. So that's an alibi. But listen, the family alibis, particularly in a bunch of people who can't seem to tell the same story twice, aren't really that credible. Then you got the Sanders. The Sanders girl that was home was 12. I think her name's Jennifer. She testified, and then it's shown that her boyfriend, she said she'd gone to the concert the next day. Her boyfriend's concert was 2 weeks later. And it's absolutely verified that that's when the concert was. So why should the jury believe her? The other sister said she was looking across the window and saw Damien and his mother and father. Doesn't say anything about seeing 4 people, which is what supposedly, I think she said she thought she saw somebody in the car, but I'm not sure about that. The story's a little different. But anyway, she said she saw Damien, Joe, and Pam go into the house. And then she said, but she thought it was 2 days before they were arrested. That's not credible. The other girl said she also saw them. And it makes you kind of wonder how much they were supposedly sitting down and watching their favorite show, 90210. And it sort of makes you wonder, how do you watch your favorite show, the show that you've been waiting all week to see, while you're staring out the window over at the house across the street? But the Meredith McKay, the other girl, is at least would be a little more credible, but she didn't testify at trial, so she wasn't an alibi witness. So, altogether, he had very tenuous alibis for all this. And none of it can be absolutely verified, and we have reason to be skeptical of anything Eccles Hutchison family says, because they're family. The Sanders were basically like family. They with Joe Hutchison and his family apparently off and on over many years. And so anything they have to say is so questionable. And then Meredith McKay, if she would have been a better witness, but they didn't bring her up to trial. And, basically her story hasn't been challenged. So he might have one potential alibi witness out of all those. And that one that doesn't testify and really hasn't said anything since is not an alibi.
Right.
But it's typical that Ruff writes off all the discrepancies and the concert dates and everything else as, I think we're about out of time. He does this with many things, but this is the episode that jumped the shark for a lot of people. And they decided that, this has really gotten to be a waste of time listening to Truth and Justice podcast with Bob Ruff, because he's not going to pay any attention to the facts. He's got another idea about where he's going to go with this.
There does seem to be a lot of complaints now as it continues further. But now we have about 5 more minutes to go. So if you have time, yeah. Good. I was going to ask you, because I asked him too about because that guy with the dentist guy who has that video and he came up with with Hobbs prosthesis. What was that guy's Howard? His name is
I don't know. I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Because there's a secret.
I haven't really gotten into the Hobbsology of this case, because if I thought that Terry Hobbs had actually done the crime, I would have a different attitude. But just even looking at the timeline that night, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Not to mention lack of motive, and you could go on and on.
Well, so anyway, I asked Bob Ruff about that, and he says, and then we talked about too the theory that he doesn't believe that bite mark evidence that this dentist has. But and by the way, dentist got so upset he blocked me from his private group, his friends group. When I mentioned, I said, Bob Ruff doesn't like your idea. That was the final straw for him. After everything else I've said over the years, he finally kicked me out. But the thing about so I mentioned this. So what do you think about the bite marks? Well, what do you think that mark is? I think it's obviously the back of the knife, like everybody thinks. But the thing is, he came up. He did an experiment with a pig and turtles.
Who, Ruff?
Yeah. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He bought. I think he bought like whole chickens and dropped them down in the water at 10 Mile Bayou. And lo and behold, the next day they were all eaten up. And so then I think he brought a small pig, or, a piglet at 60 pounds or so.
Okay.
Grossly enough, about the same size as the boys, and puts it in the water. And lo and behold, the piglet is all eaten up by turtles. Well, for one thing, 10 Mile Bayou is not the muddy ditch where the boys were found. There are lots of turtles. Let's concede there are lots and lots of turtles in those muddy ditches in Whitman County. I've seen them myself. All the rocks are covered with them. They flee immediately when you show up. They're there. And the big problem is number one, Christopher Byers bled to death before being put in the water, according to Frank Peretti, who also got trashed by Ruff very unfairly. Very, very unfairly. They were all stuck there. So killer turtles didn't do that. They didn't attack on the bank, kill him, wait for him to bleed out, and then tie him up, throw him in the water. It's absurd. But they were mashed down. They were mashed down into the mud, and really the turtles wouldn't have had easy access to the parts that were chewed up, that supposedly were chewed up. Stevie's face, and the groin area were all mashed down into the mud. Let me say briefly, Bob Ruff has made a big deal out of Peretti being forced to testify on the stand about the time of death. It's not that he just said, based on this, this, and this, and he was reluctant to say it. It was after 1 a.m., but he didn't believe that's when they were killed. He's just saying that's what if you go by objective standards, that's what it would suggest. But nobody else is suggesting, even Ruff, I don't think, is suggesting this. Then he says that Fogelman was trying to plant a later time in the minds of the jurors by giving a later time, by forcing a later timeline on them with misstatements. And Fogelman was not doing that. He said in his closing statement that the boys were probably killed between 6:30 and 8:30. Where Ruff comes up with this stuff, I don't know, but it's dangerous because people believe him.
Well, I'm glad to see you pointed all this out, and also to William Ramsey's out there pointing it out, and also Roberta Glass is also doing a great job of pointing out the inaccuracies here. We're out of time. How can people get a hold of you? How can they find you if they want to follow Gary Meece?
Well, I am on Facebook. I also have a page called The Case Against the West Memphis 3 Killers, which is, I haven't been that active because I've been trying to finish up the book. If you want to be friends with me on Facebook, you're not abusive to me, that's great. You can email me at garymeece@gmail.com. It's MEECE. I don't have a web page. I tried that, started that one time, and it was more trouble. It was a distraction, honestly.
A lot of work, yeah. Gary Meece, thank you so much. The Case Against the West Memphis 3 Killers, condensed and revised from Blood on Black and Where the Monsters Go. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Well, you got Gary Meece, always a great guest. The guy's always got his facts together, and a polite guy on the air and off the air. Doesn't go insulting on Twitter. I got to tell you, man, most of the people that are pretty normal about this thing, and we're not a lot of bickering and fighting, but you get involved with these supporters, man, it's a bunch of rude, hostile, arrogant folks, and right away with the cursing and the insulting. If you like today's show, check out our members section at OppermanReport.com. We have a whole show on there with the two of them. One was the guy named Trent Reznor, who wrote some articles about the story. We had him on. He's in the members section about the West Memphis 3. We also have Dale Griffiths, Dr. Dale Griffiths, his last interview he's ever done on this topic. It's the longest interview he's ever done. If you want to learn about Dr. Dale Griffiths before you just dismiss him as some kind of a kook, listen to the horse's mouth. The guy was a police captain, college professor. He does have a doctorate. Thank you so much. Check out OppermanReport.com. If you want to sponsor the show, you can also advertise. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.